have been drinking, watching Brokey highlights for 3 months, you gotta let this obsession go.
Fuck off, it's not an obsession.
Oh, really? Dude, I have seen your apartment. And don't get me started on your bookshelf.
What, you mean my bookshelf full of art?
New Faze isn't so bad, you just gotta give him a chance.
Maybe you're right.
You! Off the board, or I'll come up and drag you off!
Hey guys, CJ. So the ESWC playoffs are upon us, and we unfortunately have another lopsided bracket going into it, where the top side of the bracket is going to produce a really scrappy underdog team who will try their best to put up a fight and have their Cinderella run, and the bottom side of the bracket is going to win the event. This is just the Cologne Major all over again, so I guess that's a positive for ESWC, even though it would be much more interesting to see these teams split up better amongst the brackets, but they finish how they finish, and the seeding happens how it happens. There's no use complaining about that right now. But the bottom half of the bracket is teams of the likes of NaVi, Mongolz, Falcons, Faze, Vitality, and Spirit, with the more underdogs of that side of the bracket being Legacy and Bait. Bait actually being on surprisingly good form with how shaky Spirit have been. I think that actually smells a bit of an upset, but we'll get to that when we get to that. The top side of the bracket, the more standouts are G2, Furia, Aurora, FUT, and Gamerlegion. And Furia or Mouz are the real ones that I see coming out of that. Again, just like the Cologne Major. It could be interesting to see another team potentially rise up and scrap with it, but we'll get to that when we get to that. But let's start things off with the first round of 16 matchup between G2 and Astralis, a matchup that I feel like should be pretty confidently in G2's court. With the form that Astralis have been on. Their team play has been very, very subpar to me in these recent events. I mean, see all the team kills that have been going down. And I think the energy within the camp is just absolutely at an all-time low with those types of events happening in the server a lot. But it'll be a matchup more decided by the Riflers because, you know, both their oppers are actually underperforming pretty harshly right now at this event, with Wrinkle putting up a 0.99 and Fuzi putting up a 0.96, which for Fuzi, that's especially damning, but unfortunately not unrealistic, as his past couple months, he's had a 0.95 average, which really hurts as someone who has, you know, as some people have seen, put up that video about him before, that I quite enjoy Fuzi, and I think that he has a lot to give, but I think there is something just toxic in the air over at this Astralis camp. I'm not sure. They had so much potential, and they're just not finding any of it, be it whether Ryu not truly adapting to that highest level, but actually, I think actually performing quite well at this event. I think it could just be a Fuzi, you know, Hooksy clash, let's say. And maybe that clash of leadership is not allowing things to be as positive as they could be on the server, as Hooksy has in the past suffered from vibes. But G2, you know, they have Nerds, who's on almost 1.3, Heavy God, who's the best anchor in the world by any rights and has a 1.2. Wrinkle, the op on the other side of Fuzi, while still not being a fan of his pickup, he is putting up a 0.109 for this event, so he's not unserviceable. The entirety of G2, except for Mattis, is you know, positive for this event, so I think that they're going to potentially easily walk away from this, especially when you look at the map pool, because G2's pick of Dust 2, which they should see coming pretty strong, and any one of their analysts over on Astralis should see coming. Astralis are on a 4-map losing streak for that, and so that should be a pretty slam dunk, at least one of the maps for them. And it's unfortunately inversely for Astralis that is not the case, because Astralis' first ban right now is, you know, Anubis. And even though G2 is on a 4-map losing streak on Anubis, they're not going to have to play it against Astralis. So I think overall they have a pretty strong map pool against them. And even though G2 somehow finds a way to make everything a barn burner when it doesn't necessarily need to be, I think this should be a pretty comfortable win for them overall. Going on to the next one, we have Furia versus Aurora, which I think could be a very interesting matchup, as for this event, Woxic is actually on an absolute heater, putting up almost a 1.3 with some fantastic opening and closing. We have Zantaris actually on another heater with almost a 1.3. We have Yimfat almost a with a 1.25 for the event. All of the stars that you would want out of this team are performing, except for Wakadia, which is a tragic thing to see, because I've been one to tout over the past, you know, year or so now that Wakadia is slowly starting to surpass Zantaris in some ways. and take over maybe his role as the best Turkish player in the world. And maybe when Zantaris retires, he'll truly step into his own. But something about this transition over to playing under Kicksand, playing under Ash, and playing alongside, Jimfat for this new international lineup is really hitting Wakadia the hardest, which is really what you don't want to see out of your young star rifler. On the inverse side of the server, Serato is absolutely setting the world on fire with a 1.43 rating, but the rest of the team are hovering around the 1.1 area without anything truly standing out, and that's about their averages right now. Molodoy honestly needs to step up a lot more. He, ever since his Rookie of the Year debut and his, plaudits at the end of last year with their event wins, he has still shown flashes of that fantastic elastic opper that we really want him to truly settle into, but hasn't really hit that again this year too hard. He did a good job at the major finals, and they probably could have pulled something together and taken another map, but it was just destiny for Falcons to win that, unfortunately. Nico and Kerrigan needed their major. Fallen's also putting up a .09, but his in-game leading and his clutching make up for that more than enough for me if he just steps up a little bit in playoffs. If I had to be a serious guess here, I would say that I think Furia are going to take this purely based on the fact that they've been together as a team longer, and while they may not be hitting harder across the board, they'll be hitting harder in team coordination. So I think that they're just going to pretty much outplay them for the most part. There's no real standout parts of the map pool other than they both share a ban of Ancient, so we won't be seeing that. And obviously, this Aurora lineup has yet to really establish a map pool beyond that. So who really knows how this is going to go? I think this is a very big coin flip. And despite the dysfunction that we're seeing from Aurora, all of their stars are performing at a very high level. It's just, can they continue it into playoffs? And, Zantaris is known for his playoff choking. So that could be detrimental to how things are going to go. And I think it might just be a little too soon for this Aurora roster to get up and running, but they could surprise us any day of the week. Moving on to FUT versus Magic. Magic are actually the real standout rookies / underdogs of this event, who I personally didn't see coming, but their names absolutely do ring a bell. I definitely recognize AW and then their highest rated player, Tenzi. They're doing quite well for themselves, putting up a 1.13 and a 1.26 for this event, individually. And they'll be going up against the boys at FUT, who I think honestly should take this, because I was very skeptical with the removal and adjustment over at FUT of the addition of X-Flout in place of, oh my goodness gracious, why am I blanking on his fucking name? I love Lonks. There we go. Lonks, who was their best sort of two-way player, while you had, Demon and Droogs, who were the sort of, CT, T-side specialists, while being respectable on the other, were still putting up their best numbers one way or the other. Lonks was their best two-way player, having a higher average rating than them on both ways. And X-Flout has just been absolutely lighting the world on fire for them and doing some really hard carrying. And for this event, their stars are all really firing on all cylinders. It'd be really, really great to see Krebeni step up just a little bit, but his calls are what's more important here. And so I think maybe the overall talent on FUT might outclass them, but you always got to believe in a Cinderella story just for the fun of it, just because who knows what could possibly happen. And we could also see this go to Dust 2 with FUT being on a 4-map losing streak there, which could be interesting to see, as the bans for both teams, FUT will ban Inferno most likely, Magic will ban Nuke most likely. So maybe this could be a Mirage, Ancient, Dust 2 if it gets left over. But I could also see, I think it might just be a handshake on Dust 2 despite the form that FUT is on. They may try and do this 2-1. It could be a very hard-fought battle. It all really depends if the two stars over at Magic show up. And if Tenzi and AW are on, they can contend and they can stand up and maybe even go to the quarters. But if they aren't able to get things going at this, playoff level on LAN, it should be a pretty open and shut case, honestly. Moving on to the next one, we have Gamerlegion versus Mouz, which Mouz, despite all of my detriting, how shall you say, have been doing somewhat well this event. Their form has been quite good, but I think that they're a bit too heavy right now. And obviously they are coming off their most recent event win where, Spinks got his first MVP. It's they're feeling the magic right now pretty decently. But Gamerlegion have been on some interesting form pretty much ever since their event win at the end of last season in Fort Worth. Their overall form for the event right now is absolutely electric and on fire, but you can always count on Mouz to make it to the quarters of the semis and then lose. So I think despite the, how shall you say, more likelihood that they're going to be worse off individually. I think they may be better as a team overall. And they also have multiple map winning streaks on several maps right now. And they also share a first pick. So we'll be seeing a handshake map most likely, with them having Mirage and getting rid of probably Dust 2 and Anubis, leaving it most likely that I think Mouz will come on top of this just because of the overall player quality. But I think this is actually primed for an upset as well. Moving on to the lower half of the bracket, we have NaVi versus Legacy, and everyone is doing quite well across the board for both teams, except for unfortunately Art is being a rather heavy weight on the boys over at Legacy. Their constellation of stars, the Dumao, Tri, Nissim, they're all putting up 1.1 or higher, with Dumao putting up a 1.23. Doing quite well for themselves overall, but Lado has not been doing quite well this event. He's actually 0.2 rating underneath his past 3-month average and how he's been normally performing. And for NaVi, they've been finding themselves once again. The entire team is 1.5 plus. Makaze is not letting the major shake him, and he's still looking good. Bit is Bit. He's electric, and he's one of the best players ever for the NaVi jersey. Ema is doing quite well. So I think overall this should be a pretty simple affair for NaVi. I don't see this going any particular upset territory. I think just overall the brain trust of Alexi B and Blade should pretty much outstrat this. And even though Wonderful has been having a bit of a rough patch, his ceiling, if he shows up, his ceiling absolutely outclasses Tri. But Tri might be out to prove himself after the entire dumpster fire that was Passion UA, but I will go with a very solid NaVi over Legacy, in my opinion. Now, Falcons versus Mongolz. This one is very, very funny because people want to potentially believe in the hype of, the boys of Darkmeister and Tukatuk, but I think it's just too soon for them to take on a juggernaut of this caliber. Monacy is absolutely tearing the world apart, and with a 1.61 rating thus far at the event. Nico and Kyosuke are both absolutely showing up, and Tesses is, a bit heavier than we would like him to be, and Kerrigan is doing Kerrigan things. He's being a very, very strat-based IGL and being heavy at the bottom, but it's Kerrigan. Come on, we know what this is about. I think this should be a pretty clean Falcons victory, but, Mongolz are, if anything, but scrappy, but I wouldn't be surprised to also see this go 2 maps in a row of 13-5, 13-5. It wouldn't surprise me if that does end up happening. I think Falcons are a pretty solid favorite coming off of their major win, and I think that we should see them pretty easily take it over the Mongols, despite the Mongols having a pretty good streak going right now on Dust 2, and then both sharing a Mirage pick. I think it just they're going to get outclassed, and the 2 young players over at Mongolz just aren't ready, and they're not showing that they're ready yet, despite flashes of brilliance. Again, solidly Falcons over Mongolz. We got into Faze versus Vitality, which is actually a very, 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 very interesting matchup, because Vitality are absolutely not the team we know them to be. They're slipping a little bit, just a bit, and they match up obscenely well across the board right now against Faze. With, even though Jobin is a rookie at this level of competition, I think he's absolutely shown that he is a quality opper. He hits the sitters, he hits the easy shots, he has those moments of flashiness that we want out of him, which allows the other riflers on the team to be facilitated much, much, much better. And, I think that there could be some upset potential here with the teams that Vitality has been losing to, because I'll remind you that Vitality got beat by Bait, who are also here in playoffs, and they would actually run into Bait if they, we'll get to that when we get to that, but they could potentially run into Bait if Bait beat Spirit. Another upset I'll talk about in a second. But Twist is absolutely on a tear for this event, being 1.44, matching up exactly against Zywoo with a 1.44 for the event. Jacob and Flames are matching up with 1.29 and 1.28 with each other. And then Jobin is stacking up with a 1.23 for the ops. So he'll be going head to head against ZywOo, but hopefully the combination of powers over at FaZe will be able to allow them to overcome that, as both Mezzy and Apex have not really been their normal selves. Now, statistically, they're looking fine, but eye test wise, Vitality is just looking shaken and not themselves. So they're on a decline and FaZe is on a rise. And I didn't even mention Frozen, by the way. Frozen's at a 1.18, which is fantastic. And Natayu is just kind of doing what he needs to do. He actually has quite a good clutch factor, in my opinion. So I could see this actually also being a match that will be far, far, far closer and primed for an upset, which is another interesting, because I've said that about a few different matches in this bracket so far, which I think actually does go to show that despite it being a rather bottom-heavy bracket, there is some quality matchups to be found in every stage of this event. In every stage of this playoffs, and that things will actually remain interesting the entire time. But if we go down just to, a quick little look at things, FaZe have been making their home on Cash recently, and they're on a 6-map win streak there. I could very see them easily going to that with, them also playing Dust 2. We won't see Ancient or Inferno almost certainly. So I think we will see a Cash, and if we can potentially get this to be a 3-mapper, that's where I think it will come out, and where I think FaZe may actually be able to take this overall, which could be interesting, but also Vitality is Vitality. Like talking against Prime Astralis or Prime NaVi. Sure, they're having a dip in form. They could still wake up and, for just that day, still be one of the best teams of all time and absolutely steamroll FaZe. And that also wouldn't surprise me, because Rops does quite well often against his former teams, and with his understanding of Frozen and Twists and being able to be in their heads, it wouldn't surprise me if he plays a particularly impactful role in this match, as Rops is a big game player, he's a playoffs player. He could show up and absolutely shut everyone down despite the rest of the team potentially not being there, while ZywOo also having an immaculate floor. He just, he's ZywOo. What are you going to do? Moving on to Bait versus Spirit. I think this is the most interesting potential upset within the entire playoffs, because Bait, like I said, they beat Vitality earlier, sending them down to the lower bracket. Spirit have been shaky. Shiro is having just an absolutely not himself normal event. He's missing a lot of his sitters, a lot of his normal shots that he would hit, and he's looking shaky. And the overall rest of the team of Spirit are sub 1.0 or very, very, very close. Tanir is 0.87 for the event, and he just looks shaken. I saw a tweet that was honestly really funny. It was like, what happens to him? Does someone pour ice buckets on him when Hallie's around? Just playing in front of Hallie seems to set this dude on edge, or just the influence sets this dude on edge, and he just can't perform like he did all the way back at the major. Magix is putting on a, slightly better than average performance for his rating, but Zontix has also just been rather heavy for this entire roster. He's not looking good. He's not looking great. And I think this Spirit is actually very, 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 very beatable, especially with the form that we've been seeing out of Bait, with them maybe not having a truly elite player on their team that can stand out, like, a Monacy or a ZywOo or a Donk who they'll be going up against. But these guys this is a, regional matchup. This is like two South American teams playing each other. These guys most likely know each other's ins and outs very well, crack against each other in some capacity. It would not surprise me that they know each other very well. And with the form that Spirit has been on, I will call the upset of Bait over Spirit. And I think that Spirit is going to go out and it's going to leave a very sour taste in everyone's mouth. And I will remind everyone that despite this is going to be a 3-mapper because it's Bait. And even though their first pick is almost always and certainly going to be Mirage, they are on an 8-map losing streak right now. So if that's your key, if Bait win Mirage, they're gonna win the match. They're gonna win the best of 3. If they can win Mirage, they're almost 100% going to win that match. And if not, that's pretty standard, and they've kind of done that the whole way here. Coming out of those matchups that we talked about, we'll see how the quarterfinals go, but again, G2 over Astralis. I think it's going to be Furia over Aurora with their team play, FUT over Magic, Mouz over Gamerlegion, giving us for the top bracket a matchup of Furia versus G2, which is a interesting matchup to say the least. And I think that Furia would likely still take it, as Wrinkle potentially is still not fully bedded into this roster yet. But that's a very, very, very close matchup, which I do not blame anyone for coin flipping on. But I would probably, based on their recent form, I'd put it to Furia over G2, putting them to the semis. I would put Mouz over FUT, but I could see that. You know what? No, it's quarters. Mouz are getting upset by FUT. FUT are going to go on to lose to Furia. Furia is going to make another finals run where they're going to run in their opponent from the other side of the bracket, which the other side of the bracket will most likely look like NaVi versus Falcons in the quarters, with Faze, I'm going to go with my upset with Bait versus Vitality. Let's just say Bait versus Vitality, which also leaves another market potential for upset as they beat them earlier this event. And if they're feeling spiteful enough, Vitality hopefully has deeply prepared for the possibility of this matchup and will knock them down again, setting up a rematch of Falcons versus Vitality in the quarters, to then have a major rematch of Falcons versus Furia in the grand finals, where almost certainly Falcons will take it based on the form that Monacy and Nico are on right now. So that's just a bit of a preview for the ESWC playoffs. Let me know what you think down below, how you think the bracket is going to shake up, and how you think things are going to change versus what I've said. Do you think Bait versus Spirit is as much of a upset as I think it is? What other upsets am I overlooking? Or do you think I'm overestimating certain teams based on certain performances, or certain players based on their recency biases? Let me know down below. I have been CJ. Have a great rest of your day.